So Angel Barker from Buse is going to be talking about personal engagement at scale, maximizing customer experience with data, AI, and omnichannel marketing. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So just before I kind of kick off to introduce myself, so I am a director of integrated marketing at Busey Bank. We're a regional bank. We have around 19 billion in assets in care today. And we are kind of geographically spread out across the country in a variety of locations. So for some background, I think probably like a lot of, how many people here are from financial institutions? Okay, I heard somebody say agency, so I wasn't sure what the mix was. So like a lot of a lot of banks, our institution really had kind of a branding approach historically. I don't know if that's true for everybody, but part of what we were kind of tasked with a couple of years ago was starting to kick off a more personalized digital marketing strategy. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how we approach that. I welcome questions throughout, so please ask anything that you jump in if you have any questions. So these are kind of the key steps we'll run through. First, we built a team, kind of assessed our resources, really worked to understand the audience that we had, and we developed and kind of automated all of the things that we could, leveraging a lot of the AI that was just discussed, and worked to kind of unify the view for everyone. All of these steps were iterative, so I think in marketing we tend to think about the cycle, right? You put things out, you kind of learn, repeat, rinse, repeat. But each of these steps really required us to do that as well. So when we kicked off, the way that we kind of structured our marketing team, we looked at initially having, we had a campaign manager, a feedback manager, and I'll talk a little bit about these roles as well. Data analyst, we had a site manager, email and impact manager, social media, and then we would also have interns to kind of keep things fresh as we went through. So our campaign manager initially was a really great asset to our team. So all of these folks had kind of a wide diversity of skills that really helped us kind of build these resources. Our campaign manager had a graphic design background, so she was really able to kind of translate a lot of our content to both visual and written content really effectively. Our feedback manager oversees a large NPS program that we have. Does anybody here use NPS? It's a great measure, I think, for customer loyalty. One of the cool things about our program is that we have a really high response rate, and this is driven in part because we do about 98% follow-up. So in terms of when we get negative feedback from anyone in the bank or positive, our front lines do a wonderful job of responding to that feedback. So we contact 98% of the customers within 2 days to kind of follow up on the feedback that they're giving us. That information is shared throughout, so that was really important to us to kind of weave that customer experience into the marketing approach that we were building. We also had a data analyst, which of course is critical if you're trying to build kind of database marketing structure. Our site manager handled website, email, and impacts. So impacts we built essentially marketing campaigns to help manage customer impacts. So this reflected things like the change management, which I know was called out earlier when we would have system changes, how we kind of brought customers to the view that we wanted them to have throughout. So our impact manager was really focused on kind of that change management process. And then of course we had social media channels as well. So our team really focused on the own channels. What was unique about our structure, because we were kind of tasked with building out these systems, we worked alongside that brand and advertising team. So if you can imagine, I think trying to build marketing without a budget is really different, but it really forced us to kind of test some of our systems and build them really efficiently. So the key partners that we had are listed there. We partnered really heavily with our IT automation team, so that became a really important part of our work, as did kind of the business lines, so they would drive a lot of the priorities. On the channels, on the channels, we kind of evaluated digital versus traditional, whether they were passive or engaged, and customized accordingly. And then in terms of our data, some of the things that we had to think about, and again, probably a lot of you with legacy tech stacks have similar challenges. So looking at kind of what the data integrity looked like, we are an acquisition-heavy bank, so we've absorbed a lot of data, which does not always translate very cleanly, and that can really create a barrier for efficient automation. On the integration side, similarly, we wanted to make sure that everything was connected. We didn't want to constantly be pulling things out of one system into another. And so that was something that a couple of our team members had some basic API skills, so we were able to kind of leverage that to build some of those bridges to help automate more of those processes. And then in terms of kind of the availability and insight value, these were also things that we had to evaluate. I'm sure also those of you in financial institutions can see that there is a ton of data, but whether it's actually valuable to our work is a different question. And so it took some kind of initial assessment to get a feel for that. So this is one of the ideas that as we were kind of tackling those challenges, the data integrity question as well as availability came up. So does anybody here do like giveaways on social? No. So this is a strategy that I have seen used at a lot of different places, but our bank was using this pretty frequently. And so one of our team members, the social guy, came up with this idea. And basically the goal was for us to try to drive more contact record data. So again, kind of acquisition heavy, legacy type institution. We didn't necessarily have digital contact information for all of our customers. And so we would try to leverage some of those kind of standard processes and really build them out in a way that would make them more advantageous to that infrastructure growth. So in this case, he came up with this idea for Hank in the Bank. And this was kind of a concept that would run through for about 2 weeks in December. So they used to do just kind of a Christmas time giveaway. So with this, what he came up with was the idea to create this kind of treasure hunt online. And so it did a couple of different things. It drove the traffic to our website pretty significantly, but it also had a really strong customer response. And what we found was that by using this kind of process, instead of just saying, like and share to win a prize, we were able to really collect a ton of customer information. So we got several thousand emails from our first run of this campaign, which of course was a huge asset. So again, pretty low budget team trying to figure out kind of how we efficiently optimize what we're doing. So rather than just kind of putting this content out there, we were able to drive that, drive that content creation as well as kind of that feedback from customers. And it showed us that they were willing to engage. We had probably about a little over a 10% engagement rate for this campaign, which is pretty good for social. Any questions? I'm used to lecturing in college. I get questions the whole time, so. So the other kind of big piece of what we looked at was understanding the audience. So where we could build those kind of clean audiences in a way, right? We had these customers that would submit information to us and show us that they were interested and engaged in these topics that we could then target. But we also really worked to kind of divide those audiences into segments. So again, because we'd kind of had a traditional branding approach, there really wasn't a ton of information on how we wanted to reach specific segments of customers. So this is something that our wonderful data analyst tackled and was able to look at we identified segments across kind of business lines. It's a little difficult to share some of those things without getting into confidential space. So we've got a generic graphic here, but we looked at kind of what our key business lines were, as well as looking at some of the major indicators we use. So NPS is a good example. So we looked at kind of that is a category that measures customers' loyalty and satisfaction. And customers that complete surveys are broken down into 3 primary categories. So promoters, passives, and detractors. So promoters are people that are likely to refer you, essentially, and detractors would be people that are unhappy with your organization. So we were able to use kind of different groupings of those things to generate campaigns. So for example, promoters are a prime audience for referrals, right? So when they complete a survey and you see that they're a promoter and they say they're likely to refer you, why would you not ask them to refer you? So those are things that we were able to then kind of automate from those clean data sets as well. And with that, we were able to generate a pretty significant lift. So our NPS today, kind of based on some of these different campaigns and experiences, is about 3 times the national average, which is pretty awesome. So from that, we built segments initially, and then we worked closer towards that kind of personalized marketing approach. So to get there, we did some persona development. This is a generic example, but shows some of the things that we kind of focused on. So we looked at customers like transactional and behavioral data. So that's something we were able to really assess, how are they engaging, things like what channels they used. So in some cases, customers would submit preferences to us. In other cases, we were able to identify that from their engagement data. So with that information then, along with kind of basic demographic research and things, we're able to create some personas that aligned with general marketing research. And this really helped us kind of frame our messaging accordingly. So if we were going to launch a campaign and we had personas assigned kind of within our audiences, we could then target, you know, if you're in XYZ persona, then let's make sure that you get messaging that's related to your particular, you know, aspirations, for example. If we're sending a retirement campaign, it makes sense to have the framing for that targeted towards someone in their 20s very differently than you would target to someone in their 70s. And so this really helped us kind of get those segments in place. So we ended up with, I think we had about 10 segments or 10 personas initially. This also really helped us translate this to the front lines. So when, I think one of the key pieces, and we'll talk about omnichannel in a minute, but we tend to think about omnichannel within kind of the marketing channels that we manage, right? So social or website or what those main pieces are. But a really important part, especially in the financial industry, is really those relationships as well. So being able to translate kind of what we were doing and what we were communicating to the front lines in a way that helped them kind of frame this large set of data in a way that they could use and really frame their messaging as well was really effective for our team. So a couple of the things that you can see here, we had, you know, name and age, occupation, location. This kind of information too, when you kind of identify these priorities, you can translate this into the way that you're setting up your customer files for marketing and communications too, and you can leverage that for triggers. So our segments today have expanded as we've kind of grown in this program. But we would have kind of a brief description just to give context again for our partners, tenure, aspirations, product ownership, competitive products. So, you know, if they're investing with someone else and we want to try to pull their account because we know they're a heavy investor, that would be, you know, a target audience, right, for a competitive investment campaign. Preferred channels, message tone. So this was something that really reflected a lot in our communications, and especially using some of the content generative AI. We do that as well. But you know, when you're writing things, you can say, of course, a Chat GPT or whatever system you're using. You know, please frame this for a 20-year-old with, you know, this kind of interactive tone. And we also saw from that research too, we're able to see some of those kind of those cross-sell opportunities. So this did eventually help inform some of our next best product type targeting as well. So key benefits are outlined there as well. You know, we looked at, again, the content creation. How do we make sure that this was really aligned with their interests and goals? Making sure that we were targeting appropriately. And specifically for email, this was really effective for us. And those cross-selling recommendations were really useful, again, for the frontline teams. Any questions about this? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Organize that, because my mind is like, okay, sorry.
I can repeat your question.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what exactly was my question again?
What?
So essentially all those different key data points, like, are there key tools that you're using? Because that's a lot. I'm just thinking systems wise, how you really pull that together. And so I'm trying to think about how can I implement some of this or different pieces. So
yeah, great question. So yes, there were a few key tools. I will say that we tried to work with the tools that we have, and I would guess that you probably have some. I kept this system agnostic just because I know we all have different stacks, but the tools that we particularly use, so we leverage Cognos for a lot of our kind of data management and reporting. So that was an important one that allowed us to kind of aggregate data in a pretty unified way. We also used Excel, which I know is old and clunky, but it was a really easy way for those of us that weren't as data adept to kind of filter. So when we needed to kind of lean in on something, it's like, hey, take this, slice it up, you can do it. So that was really powerful for us too. We did also use a tool called Segment, which is, it does kind of transactional analysis. And that's been a really helpful tool for us too. That really helped us kind of identify some of those behavioral components. And then some of it is also just common sense market research aligned, right? So we would monitor for what research is coming out about some of these behavioral trends, purchase trends, you know, things like timing of when we're sending things or channels that are preferred. And we would monitor our engagement. So we use HubSpot for email. And when we started this team, we also migrated our social into HubSpot. So that helped us kind of sync some of those data points up. And then we also use it for marketing landing pages now, which also helps us so you can see kind of interaction histories that way. So that's been really helpful. Great question. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, don't be sorry. I'd rather have a conversation. Mm-hmm.
Influence the
It's in and out, isn't it?
yeah, it's in and out. Does that influence how the channels that you do? Like, I know you've talked about a lot about email, but when you brought up retirement advertising earlier and how you'll target Gen differently than you target someone that's older, does that work with like maybe someone that's older you're advertising via radio and someone that's like Gen you're advertising on Spotify?
Yeah, it does. It makes a difference. So some of that we would do manually. So things like, to your point, if we had so our retirement users really loved email. So a lot of our like older generations actually engaged really heavily in email. So we did take some kind of baseline assumptions, right, from market research, and we would monitor for those. But we did also then test it with our own audience, and we did see variation sometimes in what we would expect. So we did cater to those audiences based on the channels that they preferred. We also had some subsets, for example, that really prefer, especially like some of our high wealth clients and things, they really prefer that personal outreach. So we could send them an email, and that kind of we heard from the front lines that kind of gave them the boost, right? To like call and say, oh, we sent you this email and I wanted to follow up. I kind of gave them that inroad. So we would kind of partner with those teams as well to understand what would help them in their conversations. So it was kind of a balancing act between those things, but we definitely did emphasize channels more based on those things.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Good question. Any other ones? Okay. So I think with such a lean team, I appreciate that we were well resourced, and the team itself was just like a superstar team. So all credit due to them. However, trying to launch for a large institution, there were still a lot of things that we needed to do and a lot of time. So by the end of our first year, we were running 50 campaigns for 4 business lines. So that's kept us pretty busy. Across, I don't know how many channels anymore, I forget. But we did leverage a lot of kind of automation opportunities. So these are some of the ones that we used, and I know that there are a lot more, and I know there have been some talks on AI too. So I don't want to go too far into this, but just wanted to mention some of the tools that you might think of as well. So A/B tests are really important to us. I'll show a little example of one that we did in a moment. But that just kind of lets you look at, again, what language is resonating? What are some of the key factors that we can use to drive improvement on our campaigns? Optimization, so using some of those natural language models to match persona tone, that kind of thing. Dynamic segmentation and triggered automation. So again, kind of letting groups segment themselves. So if we would create kind of identifying characteristics, right? If a customer clicks on this, then we want to do X, Y, Z. Making sure that we were also capturing that list as we triggered the automation so that we had that later, right? Because if we said, oh, I wonder who that group was that really liked, our last wealth ad, we had kind of that information at our fingertips. It sounds obvious, but it was a learning for us, so I'll save you some time. Personalized content delivery, sentiment analysis. So this is something that, we would kind of aggregate feedback from online tools, and we do use a tool for this as well called Meltwater. So that's a valuable tool as well. But you can also do this. So we do some of it manually, some of our survey feedback and certain other channels like our complaints data. We do actually process that manually, and we've just used kind of Excel formulas to get a basic assessment on those as well. So I wish I could tell you that we had this all buttoned up in one like cheap and easy solution that covers it all, but it doesn't. Chatbots and internal guides. So the internal guides is a really good piece to note too. So again, kind of making sure that we're consistently saying the same things when we talk to customers, no matter where in the bank we are. This was a really critical piece for us too. So before we started this, and also early as we were kind of getting it off the ground, we definitely saw that, there would be communication pieces that would go out, right? And a customer would call and say, I got this letter from Busey, and the front line would be like, what does it say? What are you talking about? And so I think it took a little bit of time for us to kind of get those resources centralized, but making sure that we have some of those internal guides, and automation is a great way to do that. AI can kind of generate those scripts really quickly. So if you have any kind of internal queue or even like groups that your teams use to support each other, it kind of gives them those cut and paste kind of scripts. I will say too that we are moving towards like a fully AI version of that. So in terms of tools, we're working with Glia, which has been really helpful. Would recommend them as well. Audience analysis. So again, using some of this you can do, obviously you have to consider privacy, but this is something that AI can do quickly with a large set of data, and the tools for that are increasingly accessible. Predictive modeling, so next best product kind of information. So we would look at product subsets and say based on, we'd run essentially just like you can even run graphs in a more simple version of it through Excel. But if you've got 100% of your checking clients, the next product they get, let's say you look at their product open date versus savings, and you can kind of say like, hey, 60% of our checking clients went to savings next. So that's probably a good target offer as opposed to sending them to wealth. Writing custom code. So this is something that within reason, AI is getting increasingly good at that as well. Analyzing competitors and drafting key documents. So again, like if we wanted to send a summary document of something, you can kind of plug all your campaign materials into generative AI and say like, write me up a campaign overview and standardize that. Obviously, you're probably still going to want to look at it, but it can certainly save a lot of time in reporting, those kinds of things. Questions on any of that? Great. So this is kind of a quick example. This was just an AB birthday campaign. So again, kind of early on, we really tried to get customer engagement to see like what kind of information they wanted to volunteer versus us having to dig it out too. But it's also a nice touch point to send, to send a birthday message, and it seemed easy enough to achieve. So this was, again, kind of an idea from one of our stellar team members. So the AB testing, we would do a different thing each month. So we could kind of test, and she mapped out this is like a 7-page long document. So here's a quick snippet. But basically the first one we tried to see whether having the relationship manager, their banker send it, made it have any kind of different click-through rate or anything. We found it did. So you'll see kind of on our other version over here. And just as an FYI, that relationship manager gets plugged in with an actual name of whoever the person is, right? So like Angela Belcor, your banker, sent you this birthday message. So all of that kind of information. Next, we tested on whether, they liked emojis. So this actually had a pretty big demographic spread in terms of our findings. But all of these little tests really taught us a lot about kind of what would drive those higher rates. And we were able to, to achieve some pretty good results from this as well. So in this particular campaign, obviously we had testing kind of ongoing. This one still runs today, and we just continue optimizing based on whatever we want to kind of test at the moment. It's low stakes, easy to kind of move forward. But I think, when we look at some of our other, getting into some of that targeting based on personas and those engagement metrics and things, our ag services, for example, we offer like wealth management within the agricultural space. And that, we had 58.57% email open rates last year with a 34% click-through rate. So that's just an example. Some of our, it depends, it varies wildly by segment. Some of them are upwards of 80%, but we're able to really continue optimizing and driving that audience engagement in a really heavy way. Any questions on that before I go on? So in terms of unifying the view, these are some of the tools, again, that we use just to, and this is agnostic, happy to talk about the particular systems that we use, but some of this, system maps, for example, were just kind of made originally, I think, in a PowerPoint. I think now they're in a fancy or something or other, but this just kind of helped us understand what that system architecture looked like so we could think about what data was where and how we could get to it and how we could connect it to what we were trying to do. I am not an IT person, and when I tried asking some of those questions, it took me a while, so we had to kind of work to some translation of what that meant. Segment reports, so this, again, would just kind of, we monitored basically what those performance engagement things we were getting, what those personas looked like. Again, that helped translate kind of complex data sets into something that was discernible and usable by all layers of the bank. Customer engagement records. So these, again, we kind of kept individualized, that one-to-one marketing. We could kind of keep track of like, hey, what did Angela do this month? She opened these 3 emails, but she ignored this one. Let's remove her from that ongoing list. Channel and campaign dashboards, that helped us, again, kind of get standardized views of what we had going on. And then standardized overview documents. So we had like a campaign overview standard, that we would put up, send out throughout the bank before we launched any major campaign. It had, here's your key audience, here's the dates of the campaign, all the collateral was listed, and then a link to the dashboard. So everyone in the bank could kind of track that performance and understand how it was working, what was sitting with customers, whether they were looking at it or not, whether it's something they wanted to talk about. And then lastly, we did keep all of this on a centralized intranet page that had like a campaign calendar. And if you clicked on it, it would just link to each campaign overview. So kind of at a glance, people knew where to go to get this information. So this is just a kind of an example of some of the information that we would share. I'm happy to talk through templates or share some resources if anybody wants it. But there's an example of kind of a dashboard. So this was a fraud prevention campaign that we looked at. Again, we continued to optimize. So you can see like our very first fraud email must have been terrible. It was pretty low. But as we kind of optimized based on the engagement we were seeing, kind of how we were working through those materials, we were really able to improve that performance pretty significantly. The average for this, I guess, was around a 49% open rate. But you can see, you know, we did this across a lot of different channels, and kind of having that one dashboard with all of that in there, all of that material linked, honestly, it helped us keep it straight too, because when you got 50 of these and you're kind of across different channels, we were able, like I said, to push some things out through a centralized infrastructure, but not at the beginning. At the beginning, we had to manually do all this. So kind of keeping it in one place while we built towards it really helped. Yeah. It's smart. This is Smartsheet, that one. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I think that is what I've got left. I wanted to leave a couple minutes at the end in case anybody had any additional questions. Yeah. Somebody have a question? Oh, you were on it. You were ready to. I took them throughout, so maybe this means we got a 4-minute break. I don't know. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, I am happy to give you all a couple minutes back, but I just wanted to say thank you for coming and give credit to my super stellar team. So I'm happy to be able to showcase this work. I think we've had a lot of great growth, but it's definitely a huge amount of teamwork. So awesome. Thank you.